Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a literal masterclass in political patience, cunning, and the raw mechanics of seizing power. If you've ever found yourself wondering exactly how modern states are forged out of the ashes of absolute chaos and how certain leaders manage to orchestrate their rise right to the very top, well, you're in the perfect place. We're going to look at the strategies, the maneuvers, and the ultimate price of absolute control.
So think about this for a second. How do you conquer an entire country without actually starting a war? It sounds impossible, right? Today, we are looking at the paradox of an obscure Albanian mercenary who managed to master the violent, totally unpredictable chaos of early 19th century Egypt to become its undisputed, modernizing ruler. It's an unbelievable story of watching, waiting, and striking at exactly the right moment.
Part 1. Power Struggle, after the French. To really understand how he pulled this off, we have to set the stage. When Napoleon's French forces packed up and departed in 1801, they didn't exactly leave behind a stable, functioning government. No, they left a massive power vacuum that plunged Egypt into absolute, terrifying instability.
It was basically a rapid revolving door of rulers. Just look at how fast this moves. 1801, the French forces depart. Fast forward to 1803, the Ottoman-appointed ruler, Pacha, gets overthrown by his own unpaid troops. By 1804, rival Mamluk warlords, specifically El Bardisi and El Alfi, are ruthlessly battling each other for control of Cairo and the provinces. And by 1805, we're looking at unprecedented political chaos. Mamluk and Ottoman factions were literally tearing the country apart just to claim the throne.
Our historical insights today are drawn straight from the text Muhammad Ali the Great by Shafiq Gorbal. And the book paints a really grim picture here. The Egyptian populace was completely exhausted during this period. These were just regular, everyday people caught in the crossfire, getting absolutely crushed by heavy taxes, forced labor, and constant looting by these warring factions. They desperately needed a savior.
Section 2. Muhammad Ali's political cunning. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because our protagonist strategically flips the whole script. While everyone else is just wildly swinging at each other, he acts as this quiet, brilliant observer, rather than just another brute force conqueror.
You see, the old guard, the Mamluks and Ottomans, relied entirely on brute force, heavy taxation, and constant destructive infighting. They completely alienated the very people they were trying to rule. But Muhammad Ali, he relied on extreme patience, calculated observation, brilliant modern public relations tactics, and a feigned neutrality. Honestly, he was playing chess while everyone else was literally fighting in the mud.
Just look at his Machiavellian playbook. First, he totally withholds his own ambitions. He just steps back and lets the Ottoman governor Hasr Pasha fail financially. Then, he actually allows his own Albanian military factions to riot and demand pay, which cranks up the pressure. He lets Mamluk leaders like El Bardisi heavily tax and enrage the public. And throughout all of this, he maintains a separate, completely unblemished stance. He essentially just let his enemies do the heavy lifting of tearing each other down for him. Part 3. The popular will chooses. Let's see how all of this masterminding builds to a pivotal turning point in May 1805, when the Egyptian people finally hit their absolute breaking point.
On May 13, 1805, respected Egyptian popular leaders, scholars, and elites, guys like Sheikh el-Sharqawi and el-Sayed Omar Makram, took unprecedented action. They totally bypassed the traditional Ottoman rulers. The result? They offered Muhammad Ali the police, the official robe of power. These popular leaders essentially mandated him to rule, laying down strict conditions for justice and fairness.
They told him unequivocally, "We accept none but you as our ruler." Think about how crazy that is. The people, led by their scholars, practically forced the throne into his hands. He was able to bypass the Ottoman Empire's traditional authority entirely, all because the people of Egypt chose him as their champion to end the chaos.
But as history constantly shows us, gaining power is very different from keeping it. Once he was actually in charge, Muhammad Ali realized that maintaining control required a drastic shift. He had to transition from being this populist leader of the masses into a ruthless, absolute monarch. To build the modern state he was envisioning, he couldn't share power, especially not with the old warlords.
Which brings us to Part 4, the Citadel Massacre and the end of the Mamluks. We are now looking at the shocking, blood-soaked climax of his consolidation of power in the year 1811.
Muhammad Ali came to a really grim realization.
The Old Guard, those deeply entrenched Mamluk warlords who had essentially run Egypt for centuries, and even the rebellious Albanian military factions, they all had to be completely eradicated to stabilize the country. He knew, for a fact, his modern, centralized state could never exist alongside the constant threat of these independent warlords.
So, let's break down exactly how a mastermind operates with cold, calculated ruthlessness. Step 1. He organizes a grand military expedition to Arabia. Step 2. Under that pretense, he invites all the Mamluk leaders up to the Citadel in Cairo for this lavish farewell ceremony. Step 3. Once they are deep inside the narrow rock passages, he traps them behind the massive gates. Step 4. His troops eliminate the opposition entirely. It was a swift, total eradication. Now, there is a profound, almost wild irony noted in our source text. The author points out, he was a man who hated massacres and abhorred violence, yet he took on the responsibility of others to end the chaos. He personally despised bloodshed, yet he went ahead and orchestrated one of the most horrific massacres in history just to permanently end the systemic violence of the Mamluks that had plagued Egypt for generations.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate historical paradox of his reign. Muhammad Ali absolutely built modern Egypt, but he built it on a foundation of absolute, ruthless authority. Achieving that unprecedented modernization, building armies, establishing schools, creating major infrastructure, it was all only made possible through his unquestioned control of the entire nation.
So I want to end today by leaving you with this provocative thought to ponder. Was this bloodshed truly the only way to break that centuries-old cycle of chaos and build a modern state? Could Egypt have moved forward without the sheer brutality of the Citadel massacre? It's a tough question, but it really lays bare the true, often brutal mechanics of state building and power. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.